Two great minds in discussion, Jordan Peterson and Douglas Murray. And they're speaking about the Holocaust. Interesting. Listen in.
In our age, you hear people all the time saying things like the lessons of the Holocaust.
Yeah.
So what are you talking about? Which lessons? And generally, it devolves into kind of banality of like, be nice to people. Like, don't mass murder people. Sure. Okay.
Right.
Beyond that.
Right. And the devil's in the details, unfortunately.
In the details on this. In fact, by the way, it's very hard to say anything new about Auschwitz. And you sort of feel everything is being said that could be said in a way, and at the same time we know nothing about it. But I was very struck. Martin Amis, who died recently, wrote a novel in the 90s. It was very controversial at the time, called Time's Arrow. Everything goes backwards. The whole plot of the novel goes, time is reversed. So if somebody is sick, they go to a pile of sick and inhale it and then walk happily around their day. So it's a device that works well at times as an abusive parent. The child is crying, the parent smacks the child and he stops crying. It's a device that makes you able to look at things in an interesting way. But he was much criticized for Amos in the 90s because he does the Holocaust. He addresses the Holocaust in the book. And everyone said, oh, you're using it as a literary device. I actually think by doing what he did, he actually showed one of the very few new insights I've ever seen about the Holocaust, which is that the people whose job it is to take the bodies out of the ovens would give birth to these people from the ovens. Late in the novel, one of them confides to one of his colleagues that he's getting nervous because the people that they're bringing out of the ovens now don't seem right. They're more and more disabled. They're more and more ill. Is it worth even taking them out of the ovens? So strangely enough, by doing it in reverse, you get an idea of how it started.
Right.
You get an idea of how it started.
Yeah, well, the thing is terrible things start one thing at a time. Right?
And in this case, again, by a desire on behalf of some people to alleviate suffering or to
claim to
alleviate suffering, to view some lives as less valued than others, perhaps hardly worth living. Goes back to what we were saying about Canada today. To view, I urge people to think of it this way round, because if you think about it this way round, it's much easier to see how you start. But the other thing,
that is how things started in Nazi Germany too, right? Is that because the progression towards the death camps was a progression through euthanasia. And I've looked at a fair number of the propaganda films from the mid-30s where the Nazis were starting to clean up the asylums, and they would go in and, like, I've been in backward asylums when I worked at the Douglas Hospital in the 1980s. There were still people there who had been on the wards, who hadn't been deinstitutionalized, who had been on the wards for like 4 decades. And they would kind of lurk in the corridors that were underground at the Douglas Hospital because it was like a university campus that was connected by underground passageways. And it was like Dante's Inferno down there. I mean, and you could easily go there and make the case that, oh my God, is a life of being on a backward in a psychiatric hospital, wrapped up in a straitjacket for 3 decades, worth living. And well, that brings that whole terrible conundrum up in front of you. And there's no simple answer you can jump to there. But one of the answers, the answer that is something that should therefore be handed to the state to deal with in some efficient manner, that's definitely not a good.
But the idea that it's a question that the individual should wrestle with is naturally the case. I mean, that this is something that people should think about and will always think about as long as people think. It seems to me very obvious. I've always been struck by one of Elie Wiesel's works.
So just a brief thought about some of the lessons from the Holocaust. Germany was the elite when it came to sciences, when it came to culture, and yet they stooped down to the lowest of the low. And speaking about, what was there at, dealing with the crematoria and dealing with those who were less than, right, more disabled, I think the bottom line that comes to mind is that if we're created in the image of God, just God is one and unique and singular, so like is every human life, and needs to be dealt with in such a way. And someone who's got a disability doesn't make them less than because they're one unique and special. I actually am privileged to have a granddaughter who has Down syndrome, and no one prays for having such a child, but that child has brought so much joy and so much connection, so much love that we look at her as one unique and special, created in the image of God, a piece of God in her. And that was something that's missing. Science, it's missing in the sciences, it's missing in culture, this belief of the uniqueness of every human being and therefore respecting life. I think that's an important lesson that we need to take from, one important lesson to take from the Holocaust. But let's hear about Elie Wiesel now and his important lesson.
It was, of course, in Auschwitz. I don't know if you know The Trial of God. Did you ever read that one?
No.
It's worth reading, and there's a version of it he replays in another of his books. I think the Gates of the Forest called. Anyhow, it was something that I think Wiesel saw in Auschwitz. But there was a night where in the camp they have some rabbis decide that they will put God on trial. And Wiesel describes it in extraordinary detail, and it's riveting. The silence in the room, and eventually the case for the prosecution, the case for the defense, given by very, very learned rabbis from Poland, and nobody could know more than these men routinely knew, which is a reminder of what was lost. But in the end, they find God guilty.
See, the Jews never did that in the Old Testament.
Well, no, but then something very important happens.
Okay.
Which is that they find God guilty, and there's a silence in the heart. And they realize what they've done. And then somebody says, one of the rabbis says, okay, it's Friday night. We need to go and do our prayers. And they do.
Wow. That's an amazing, beautiful story. Why did they go do their prayers? They find God guilty, is one thing. But that doesn't mean there isn't a God, and he is the one that we need to pray to. Guilty based on what the Torah teaches. It's not the first time. I don't know if the word guilty is the right word, but Moses, after the sin of the golden calf, God wanted to destroy the Jewish people and start anew from Moses. And Moses says, if that's the case, I don't want to have anything to do with your Torah. Erase my name from the Torah. Well, you can't destroy the people because they had sinned with the golden calf. See, Moses contested against God. You can't do that. And God admitted and brought it and said, you're right. You're right in what you say. Now, why did God say that to begin with? Because he wanted to bring out a deeper connection that Moses has to the people of Israel, that's even deeper than his connection to the law. And therefore, he's more devoted even to the sinners of the Jewish people, that he stands up for them. And that's what the rabbis did. But does that mean God is not still the one that we pray to? Is God not still the one who everything in is his hands? The only thing that's in our hands is our devotion, our commitment to what right from wrong, and to our commitment to the people. So Moses took the commitment to the people more seriously than their transgression of the law of God, that's more important, and that's deeper, the connection. And maybe the rabbis, that's what their idea is there also. Commitment to the people is even greater, but that to the law, not to God. It's not a less of a commitment, and that's an important lesson to learn out from this. We see something horrific like the Holocaust, or today, October 7th, and our modern day Holocaust. That doesn't mean that we leave God because of it. How could you do it, God? God, sorry, can't let this happen in the future. We're committed and strong, and we stand up for our people and for all people. But that doesn't mean we detach ourselves from him. That doesn't mean we weaken our observance of our Jewishness, of Judaism, of Torah mitzvahs, or for that matter, for someone who isn't Jewish, to the commitment to God and through the 7 Noahide laws. We remain strong in our commitments. That's the real lesson of the Holocaust.